Here in the United States, we like to think of ourselves as an untouchable hegemon, a modern Roman Empire, but threats abound and the barbarians are at the gates. You may be thinking, is it China? Is it Russia? Maybe it's something more esoteric like climate change or widening wealth inequality. It's those plastic brick-making f***s in Denmark. In early January 2025, then US President-elect Donald Trump made waves around the world by suggesting that the United States would not rule out territorial expansion through the use of economic coercion or military force. Trump suggested the US regain control of the Panama Canal and annex our silly northern neighbors in Canada as the 51st state. But today, we're going to talk about a place even more inhospitable than Toronto or Winnipeg, one already in possession of a nuke: Greenland. No, Greenland doesn't have nuclear weapons, but it does have a tiny city named Nuuk on its frigid western coast, with a population just shy of 20,000. Greenland is an island and autonomous Danish territory located far up north, nestled in a four-way hug among the Arctic Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, North America, and Europe. Greenland is the world's largest island, and it's nearly as large as Africa, if you look at it on a Mercator projection. In reality, Greenland is about 2.16 million square kilometers compared to Africa's 30.4 million square kilometers, making it about 14 times smaller. But hey, that's still pretty big for an island. Greenland is also aptly named because the island is nearly entirely covered by a 1.67 kilometer thick ice sheet that, if painted green, would be the greenest island on the planet. Really though, Greenland got its name from Norse settlers. Eric the Red, a Norse explorer, was exiled from Iceland around 982 AD, probably for hoarding Aurora Borealis in his kitchen. In his exile, he explored the frozen island, founded a permanent settlement, and named it Greenland in the hopes that it would attract more settlers. Greenland has a population today of around 57,000 people, so his plan didn't really work. Stick to pillaging and plundering, Eric. Marketing doesn't seem to be your forte. Before Eric the Red's 10th century booze cruise around the island, Greenland had already been settled as early as 2500 BC by the Saukik people, a Paleo-Inuit culture, at various intervals throughout millennia. But of course, history has told us that, unless a European discovers it, it doesn't exist. The Norse settlements, located on the southern part of the island, existed for about 500 years before being abandoned. We're not entirely sure why they were abandoned, but our crack team of historians and climatologists locked in our basement with Aaron have spent the last 10 minutes determining that it's probably because Greenland is a dark, inhospitable frozen wasteland that makes it nearly impossible to cultivate crops other than chunks of solid ice and frozen despair, both of which lack much nutritional value. Several hundred years later, in 1721, the Norwegian missionary Hans Egede led an expedition of Dano-Norwegian merchants and clerics to Greenland in search of the Old Norse settlements with whom the European mainland had lost contact. They didn't find any existing settlements, but their expedition marked the return of permanent European settlement and colonization of the island. Over time, the government of Denmark-Norway facilitated more trade with and travel to the island. The Crown Union of Denmark-Norway dissolved in 1814 with the Treaty of Kiel, leaving Greenland under Danish control, where it has remained ever since, with some exceptions, such as when the United States occupied it with the Danish government's consent during World War II to prevent it from falling into German hands like mainland Denmark. The United States relinquished control of Greenland to Denmark after the war, but the burgeoning Cold War ensured that Greenland would remain a critically strategic territory for the NATO alliance, of which both the United States and Denmark are founding members. During the Cold War, the Danish government allowed the United States to operate military bases on the island, such as the Thule Air Base, now the Bidufik Space Base, located along the northwest coast. In 1953, Denmark ratified its current constitution, and with it, ended Greenland's colonial status and instead incorporated it into the Kingdom of Denmark as a county, granting Danish citizenship to all Greenlanders. In 1973, Denmark joined the European Communities, the predecessor to the European Union, which further complicated Greenland's relationship with Denmark. In 1979, Greenlanders voted 73% to 27% for Home Rule, which led the Danish government to pass the Home Rule Act of 1979, establishing a Greenlandic parliament and granting Greenland sovereignty over things like education, fisheries, environmental policy, and health policy. In 1985, Greenland left the European Communities over disagreements primarily regarding commercial fishing policies, an issue that has posed problems, at times, with the EU's relationship with both Iceland and the United Kingdom. In 2008, Greenlanders again voted 76% to 24% for greater self-rule. The Danish government once again passed legislation honoring the referendum, ultimately giving the island more control over their police force, coast guard, and court system. This referendum was seen by observers as a major step toward formal independence for Greenland, but the island has largely remained in the same political status ever since. Today, the Danish government controls the foreign affairs and defense of Greenland, and provides financial support with a generous annual block grant, allowing it to provide to its citizens important services like universal healthcare. Today, Greenland is the least densely populated region on the planet, but it boasts a high GDP per capita of roughly $57,000 and a high Human Development Index score of 0.786. Those data points are from 2021 and 2010 respectively, because as map nerds know, data for anything about Greenland is usually not available. Greenland's culture is a unique blend of traditional Inuit and Scandinavian cultures. From Inuit culture, they carve tupilak, which are small figures carved from animal bone, tooth, and antlers and are used for shamanistic purposes. From Scandinavian culture, they assemble shoddy furniture made from animal bone, tooth, and antlers that is also used for shamanistic purposes. Sadly, Greenland is beset by a number of problems, such as substance abuse and mental health issues, emigration, limited economic diversification, financial dependence on Denmark, and its largely untouched and otherworldly environment is bearing the brunt of anthropogenic climate change. Which brings us to our next section. Greenland's sheer size and harsh conditions mean that it is absolutely filled to the brim with largely unexploited natural resources. If you want rare earth minerals, uranium, gold, copper, lithium, and barrels upon barrels of that sweet, sweet black gold, look no further than Greenland. The United States, despite being blessed with abundant natural resources and arguably the best geography of any country on the planet, is still a resource-hungry behemoth. We depend on all of those shiny rocks and slick oil to make our fancy electric cars buzz along the streets and to make our UFOs blurry enough to terrify people in New Jersey. Incorporating Greenland as an American territory would facilitate exploitation of these natural resources. Greenland also occupies an incredibly important geostrategic location at the top of the world. During the Cold War, the superpowers focused a lot of their efforts on proxy wars around the world and preparations for a potential hot conflict on the European continent. The locations of the United States and the Soviet Union ensured that any potential nuclear exchange in a Cold War gone hot would involve firing volleys of nuclear-armed intercontinental ballistic missiles across the Arctic, as it provided the shortest flight path for missiles to hit their targets. Beginning in the Cold War, the US placed early warning systems on the island to detect incoming Soviet missiles and provide decision-makers in Washington with more time to decide whether to cook the Soviets in response. Modern systems are still in use in Greenland. Thule Air Base, as mentioned earlier, allowed the United States to station fighters that could intercept Soviet aircraft as they flew over the Arctic to drop bombs on American targets, and bombers that could retaliate against the Soviet Union in the event of a war. The US also operated surveillance aircraft at the base to keep tabs on Soviet activity in the Arctic. Denmark even allowed the United States to station nuclear weapons at Thule in violation of Denmark's nuclear-free zone policy. In fact, in 1968, an American B-52 bomber carrying nuclear bombs crashed outside of Thule and radioactively contaminated the area. The US and Denmark worked jointly to clean up the disaster, but one of the nuclear bombs was never recovered, so you know where to look if you're in the market. The base was transferred from the United States Air Force to the Space Force in 2020 and renamed Bidufik. Greenland also served as a critical point in the GI-UK gap, two naval choke points between Greenland and Iceland and the United Kingdom, for the alliance to detect Soviet submarines entering the Atlantic. Despite the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia's nuclear arsenal and submarine force remain a threat to NATO, ensuring that Greenland remains a critical part of the alliance's strategy and American interests in particular. Formal control of the island would make it easier for the United States to incorporate it into its national security strategy. The history of the United States is one written in blood and territorial expansion. Perhaps Trump's desire to annex Greenland, if sincere, is born of a personal desire to anchor his name to a permanent fixture of American territorial expansion, to cement a legacy that cannot easily be undone or forgotten by future leaders and generations. Maybe he likes the way the map would look. The contiguous United States, Alaska, and Greenland, giving Canada a big hug. Or maybe this is part of a more nefarious strategy to sow discord among American allies, something Trump has repeatedly done since his emergence as a national political figure in 2015. Maybe Trump's talk of territorial expansion is nothing more than a spectacle tossed to myopic and self-absorbed media to distract them from more consequential and substantive news stories. This is Trump we're talking about. It's impossible to know for certain what he thinks, what he means, and how sincere he is in either case. While some American nationalists may be frothing at the mouth at the prospect of territorial expansion, Denmark has made it abundantly clear that Greenland is an integral part of its kingdom and is not for sale. Other American and Danish allies, like France and Germany, have warned Trump that they won't tolerate threats to allies' territorial integrity. In the Harambe is still alive timeline, the story would end here. But sadly, we don't live in that timeline, and this is a YouTube video, so of course we're going to talk about an American invasion of Greenland. But first, let's discuss the possibility of the United States using economic coercion to force Denmark to cede Greenland. Trump has said he wouldn't rule out using tariffs in this pursuit. Denmark, despite being a significantly smaller country and economy than the United States, is a member of the European Union, whose $19.4 trillion GDP in nominal terms is second only to America's $29.2 trillion. Trade policy is the jurisdiction of the European Union, rather than its individual member states, meaning Brussels has the ability to respond to American tariffs with its own tariffs on American goods and services entering the European market. The US and EU are two of each other's largest trading partners, and mutual tariffs would only hurt both sides of the Atlantic for no good reason. Next, let's talk about military action. Could the United States successfully invade Greenland? Yeah, no question. Greenland is 3 times less populous than the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Denmark, despite having a highly developed economy and technologically advanced armed forces, has a population of just 6 million people and 0 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. This is my shameless plea to the Danish people to pour their national resources into producing a 100,000-ton supercarrier made entirely of Lego, named the RDN Niels Bohr, because that would be hard as f***. As a NATO member, Denmark would be within its rights to invoke Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, the Collective Defense Clause, against American aggression. But because the United States dominates NATO in both military assets and spending, don't count on the rest of NATO to be able to match American firepower, even if they did come running to Denmark's aid. As weird as it might be to think of a potential conflict between NATO members, there have been persistent fears, for decades, of some kind of conflict between Greece and Turkey, though this fortunately has never come to pass. Most importantly, any kind of non-consensual annexation of Greenland by the United States would completely torpedo the reputation of the United States among its allies. Why would any country trust the United States to protect them from aggressors when they themselves could be the aggressor? Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, the rest of NATO? All of them would be less secure in a world where an unhinged United States has embarked on another round of manifest destiny. And what do insecure countries do when faced with existential threats? They find other allies or build nuclear weapons. Maybe both. This would give the US less diplomatic, economic, and military leverage around the world, as it would ruin its reputation as a guarantor of its allies' sovereignty, find itself with fewer friendly markets with which to trade, and fewer places to operate overseas military bases, one of the keys to its unrivaled global power projection. Lastly, Greenland isn't some territory held by a hostile foreign power. It's a part of Denmark, an ally of the United States. Denmark has allowed the United States to build and operate military installations on the island without much issue for the better part of a century. Danish soldiers have also given their lives in defense of the United States, particularly after the latter invoked Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty following the September 11th terrorist attacks. Denmark suffered the highest per capita losses of coalition forces during the Afghanistan War. Denmark and Greenland aren't just allies of the United States, but they're also our friends. Annexing Greenland without Danish or Greenlandic consent would offer nothing of substance to the United States that it cannot already get through its current political status. But it would risk the stability of the entire international order. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a drop. Oh, and go ahead and tell us in the comment section that our profile picture is Indonesia and not Poland. We haven't heard that one before.